Hello everyone, it's me again, and it's time for yet another episode of the Mainline Mario Marathon. In the last episode I talked about the Super Mario Advance games, obviously for the GBA. During the early to mid 2000s, handheld Mario games were almost entirely remakes of past titles. The Advance games were mixed in quality, to say the least. Advance 2 and 4, the remakes of Mario World and Mario 3 respectively, were generally pretty solid, but Advance 1 was just kind of awful, much like the game it was a remake of. But now we're finally past that chapter of the marathon, and I can finally move on to the video those who watched earlier episodes of this marathon were probably waiting for. That's right, it's finally time to talk about Super Mario 64 DS. That was the game that everyone was waiting for, right? Well, assuming people even watch these videos in the first place. Anyways, so basically it's Super Mario 64. Except nowhere near as good. It does have extra characters, interesting extra missions, and level design changes that I approve of, but the controls are just garbage in this version. I know that's a point everyone brings up, but I don't care. The handling was far better in the original. 64DS has stiff turning and the acceleration is completely out of whack. This would have been a fine remake, but those controls, man, they make this game way more frustrating than it has any right to be. And no, playing it on an emulator with a real analog stick does not fix the issue, since it's still the same clunky controls that were designed for the D-pad. Honestly, Nintendo should have waited until they had a handheld that was capable of providing a good experience in this game. And this is coming from someone who played this version first, as a kid. So yeah, there's the latest addition to Mario games I don't like, and that's really all I've got. That was short. In fact, too short. Oh well, I might as well review Super Mario Galaxy while I'm at it. So yeah, in all seriousness, this is a review you were probably waiting for if you've watched even one of the past episodes of this marathon. Among all the Mario games, the Galaxy duo are easily some of the most beloved. If you ask any given person what their favorite 3D Mario game is, chances are they'll say either of the Galaxy titles. They were the Wii's star Mario games that continue to be the most well-loved entries in the entire series, apart from the original 2D games on Odyssey. Of course, today I'll be covering Super Mario Galaxy, released on the Wii in 2007. The story today begins in the early 2000s, as it always seems to in these videos, but anyways, I've told this same story many times on this channel by now, but in the early 2000s, Nintendo's home consoles weren't doing so well. The Gamecube was the worst selling of the three main 6th generation consoles. While it had many great titles on it like Sonic, Star Fox, Monkey Ball, Pac-Man World 2, and even Paper Mario and Super Mario Sunshine, both from this series, it's impossible to deny history. Despite how good of a system it is, the GameCube was sadly a commercial failure. However, Nintendo's console business wouldn't completely go under because, like I went over last time, the GBA was an overwhelming success, as was the DS. Because of this, the company had the opportunity to make one more home console, and one more chance to reach the sales they had during the NES, SNES eras. In 2005, Nintendo released trailers for their newest system, the Revolution. Personally, I think that's a way cooler name than what they decided to go with, but whatever, you can't change history. Maybe they thought it was too generic or whatever. Anyways, their new console, then renamed to the Wii, was quite different from their previous ones, as it would be the first Nintendo console to fully implement motion controls. Now, motion controls weren't anything new, as the GameCube was actually planned to have them. Some games in the GBA made use of them, and of course, there's the Power Glove. We don't talk about the Power Glove. But the Wii was the first major console to fully focus on them as an integral feature. It worked, sometimes, and other times not so much, but it's an overall great console. The Wii was basically a GameCube with some extra processing power, so essentially Nintendo used it as a second chance for that hardware. Early models were even backwards compatible with GameCube games, which is actually the most inexpensive way to get progressive scan out of those games. It also allowed you to play games from older platforms through the Virtual Console, and on top of its own library of games, these things probably make it the overall best Nintendo console. The downside, however, is that it was far weaker than its competition, the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, something that still afflicts this company's consoles to this day. That being said, the Wii became the best-selling console of the 7th generation, and essentially set the company up for life for at least the next decade. Naturally, it would be the home of the next big 3D Mario game, which is where Super Mario Galaxy finally comes into play. While the previous mainline 3D game, Super Mario Sunshine, was well received, it was more mixed than Super Mario 64. I personally love the game, but it's impossible to deny that its reception was rather divisive. As a result, Nintendo wouldn't bring FLUDD back for the next entry. Rather, they would make the movement closer to SM64 again while sending Mario to an all-new setting. Space! Well, that is if you don't count Super Mario Land 2, but that was only for one short world. Super Mario Galaxy would be an entire game set in outer space. If that doesn't sound like the coolest damn thing ever, then I don't know what would. Regardless, the game was a huge hit, and it impressed pretty much everyone. Reviewers praised the creative level ideas, impressive visuals, gravity mechanics, soundtrack, story, and more, and it would go on to become one of the highest rated entries in the entire Mario series. To this day, its influence on the series can be felt, and it maintains its incredibly positive reception. This was actually one of the games in the series that I grew up with. Well, I didn't play it as much as I did watch my little brother play it because I was a little bitch back then, but let's not speak of it. Needless to say, I have a level of nostalgia and fondness for the game, but I won't allow that to affect my judgment. So now it's my turn to give my take on this legendary entry in the series. How well do I think it's held up 15 years later? Does the game live up to its legacy and stand head and toe with all the previous Mario triumphs I've talked about on this channel? Well, that's what you're here to find out. This is my review of Super Mario Galaxy, so sit back and enjoy yourself. Like pretty much every other game in this series, with the exception of certain spin-offs, the story isn't anything groundbreaking. Interestingly enough though, Galaxy does attempt to do more with its plot than the previous platformers in the series. I already said that Sunshine attempted this in my review of the game, and while that game's story is one of my favorites in the series, it's mostly in an ironic way if I have to be honest. The story of Galaxy is, I'll just say it, much better from an objective point of view. As I said, it isn't groundbreaking stuff, nor is it particularly original, as you'll see, but I nonetheless think it's fairly interesting because of the game's setting and the higher stakes it aims for. The game opens up with a recap of a previously unmentioned event that occurs periodically. Every 100 years, an unnamed comet shows up in the night skies above the Mushroom Kingdom, which oddly enough reminds me of those old Pokemon movies I would watch a bunch for whatever damn reason. Anyways, this comet makes an appearance over the Mushroom Kingdom once again, and this time it's rather large and causes shooting stars to fall to the ground. The citizens of the kingdom collected these shooting stars and brought them to the castle, where they reformed and became a giant power star, referred to as a Grand Star. They're also pretty similar in size to the giant star you collect at the end of Super Mario 64, so that's cool. Because of this, a celebration called the Star Festival is held, and it's said that this should have been, not is, a happy time for the kingdom. Ooh. Ominous. Speaking of Super Mario 64, the perspective changes to the actual Star Festival, and the game's plot truly begins in the exact same way as that game. Princess Peach sends Mario a letter telling him to come to the castle, except this time because of the Star Festival, not because she made a cake. Although she probably still, Mario makes his way to the castle to meet her, all the while talking to the happy toads and observing the falling stars. However, the minute he gets close to the castle, disaster strikes. Bowser's airship armada flies in, launching a surprise attack. They also take a page from Nasty Nork and start freezing the citizens in crystal as they approach Peach's castle. Bowser himself appears on his flagship and says Peach is invited to the creation of his new galaxy. Turns out he has some pretty big ambitions this time around. The bastard doesn't just want to take over the kingdom, but rather the entire universe. Peach is also seen holding an unknown starlight creature, which Bowser seems to have an interest in for whatever reason. Bowser then summons a gigantic UFO that used to scare the fucking shit out of me as a kid, but then again I was scared of the gigantic gingerbread man in Shrek 2, so I guess anything big creeped me out. Whatever, I was a pussy. Moving on. Mario rushes to the castle to put a stop to this madness, but he's powerless to do anything. The UFO comes into place above the castle and shoots out giant fucking laser beams that cut out a chunk of land under the castle. You know what? I take back what I said. I can easily see why this scared the piss out of me back then. Bowser's airships drop their anchors and use them as towing cables. I bet you know what's about to happen, especially if you've played a certain RPG spin-off. Bowser's airships lift Peach's castle and carry it into outer space. Mario was thankfully quick enough to make it to the castle and is lifted along with it, but just before he can catch his breath, Kamek shows up and knocks him off the castle with magic, and he goes flying into the outer reaches of space. However, the silver star creature follows him as Bowser's fleet carries the princess's castle to parts unknown. Yeah, this is basically the same story as Paper Mario on N64, another one of my childhood games. It's not an exact copy because Galaxy has some different characters and Bowser's ultimate plan isn't the same between the two. I just find it kind of funny. Mario wakes up on a lonely, small planet, unsure of where he is. The silver star creature appears and morphs into a rabbit, and then leads Mario to a group of his friends. After Mario catches all three, the rabbits morph back into their celestial forms, and they lead him to their mother, the protector of the cosmos, Rosalina, and as it turns out, this planet was the gateway to the starry sky, as she puts it. The Star Guy, part of a species called Lumas, joins forces with Mario and gives him new powers, specifically the ability to spin. Mario then quickly and effortlessly disarms one of Bowser's nearby machines, freeing one of the stolen Grand Stars. He's then taken to a special space station known as the Comet Observatory. As its name implies, this observatory is what the comet that shows up every century actually is, and it's come to a stop above Mario's home planet. Bowser's fleet siphoned away the star bits, power stars, and grand stars it had, making the ship lose power and freeze in space. Bowser took Peach to the center of the universe as a means to set up his new galactic empire, and the only way Mario was able to get there is by finding a power source for the observatory. Now he has to travel across space and through various galaxies to collect the scattered stars so he can give the observatory power once again, fly to the center of the universe, and put an end to Bowser's there's intergalactic terrorism and imperialism. There's some minor evidence that I paid at least some attention in history class, I guess, because I know those words and whatever. Anyways, while this plot can once again be boiled down to Princess Peach getting taken away by Bowser, a well-established trope in the series ever since the very beginning, the things surrounding that make it more interesting. These pre-2009 Mario plots are a lot more intriguing than I remember, what can I say? This time around, the higher stakes and new characters allow it to be more interesting than usual. Rather than a kingdom, an island resort, or what have you being at risk of takeover from Bowser, this time it's the entire universe. Especially later on in the game, the scale and world-ending implications become apparent. There's also several emotional and even sad moments sprinkled throughout that help this game's story stand out even further, but we'll get to that when we get to it. And can I just say the cutscenes in this game still look great? Sure, they're pre-rendered, which means they retain some compression artifacts when scaled to a higher resolution. In-engine cutscenes are usually the best possible outcome because they use in-game graphics and thus and still look great with the right equipment. Though this is a 2007 Wii game, so I can get over it. The underlying CG itself still looks fantastic, and to be honest, the compression artifacts weren't too distracting. Maybe that's just not something I'm tuned to notice, but yeah. Speaking of how things look, time for the graphics. Throughout this whole marathon, I've been praising the graphics of all these games. With a few exceptions, of course, but for the most part, this series has a great aesthetics. Super Mario Galaxy is no exception to this, and features some of the best aesthetics in the series thus far. I'd actually say it's one of the better looking games on the Wii, which, just like Super Mario Sunshine, is impressive considering how early it came out in the console's time in the market. However, there's a bit of a confession I have to make. If you watch pretty much all of my reviews up to this point, you may notice that the footage doesn't look quite as good as it can, let's just say. I'm not dissatisfied with any of those videos, but still, I can do way better. So recently, I've taken it upon myself to fix that and improve the footage quality of my videos for the best viewing experience I can possibly provide. I was originally going to do these reviews with composite video, but by now I've realized how bad that looks for 3D games in particular, so I've made a big change. One you may have noticed in small bits if you saw my last video. It's my pleasure to announce that in between the 2021 Game Collection Tour video and the Super Mario Advance review, I got myself an open source scan converter. If you're still living under a rock and don't know what that is, it's an upscaler, well, technically a line doubler. I'm sure I just saved myself at least one snarky comment with that. In simple terms, it takes the lower resolution signals output by retro consoles like 240p or 480p in this case, and it makes the image look really good. In my opinion, this is the best option for people looking to get into recording old games, because it's much less expensive than the XRGB Mini FrameMeister, and produces a better picture than something like the RetroTink, though those are still pretty good options if you can get your hands on them. Only problem is that it's incompatible with some capture cards, but if you have an Elgato HT60S like me, then it works fine. Personally, I think the result speaks for itself, especially when put next to the composite. Naturally, I used the Wii's component output to record the game for this review, and I think it looks fantastic. Now, if the footage seems a bit off color though, it's because I accidentally recorded it a bit too dark and had to brighten it up in post. I'll be sure to learn from this in my next review, but even with that said, I still love how this game looks. I personally prefer the general art direction from Sunshine because of its more broad color palette and consistent beach island theming, but I would be lying if I said Super Mario Galaxy wasn't an overall visual improvement, from an objective standpoint at least. The textures are generally better drawn, the models and geometry are a noticeable step up, and best of all, the art direction holds its own. I've gone on record saying the tropics are one of my favorite aesthetics a video game can have, which was the reason I said Sunshine had my favorite presentation in the series. Honestly, I love the outer space aesthetic just about as much, so I have a fondness for the theming of Super Mario Galaxy as well. Even though it's running on what's essentially a slightly beefed up Gamecube, it still has an impressive look for the time of release. Mario Galaxy has a real adventurous scope to it, and not to sound cliche, but it makes it feel like Mario is going on an out-of-this-world adventure, and you're along for the ride. What also helps is that this is the first Mario game to support widescreen, as well as the first 3D game in the series to run at 60 FPS. The game rarely, if ever, has performance drops as well, and complete with the 480p resolution that cleanly upscales just like Sunshine, this is one of the best looking Mario games thus far. Where its weaknesses lie come in two particular visual aspects, one minor and another somewhat major. The textures are pretty crisp, but when viewed up close, they have this really weird quirk where a lot of things look like they're made out of felt or some other kind of fabric. That's not a huge deal, but it's strange. Second, my more major critique, and this one is honestly more of a personal taste thing. In my Sunshine review, one of the things I praised was the well-crafted world. That game took great pains to make Isle Delfino feel like an actual interconnected world, with other levels being visible in the distance and all that. It truly felt lived in, like a place you could actually visit, minus the weird wacky fantasy Mario shit of course. Galaxy goes for something much closer to Super Mario 64, where each individual level, or galaxy, is disconnected from the others. It feels a bit more justified since this time we're traveling the cosmos, but I still personally prefer when games attempt to make their world worlds feel lived in, over when they feel like just a collection of disconnected stages. I mean, Ratchet & Clank was able to do that just as well, if not better than Sunshine, and it was also set in outer space, but enough about that. I don't want to spoil the inevitable reviews I have planned for those games. That being said, Super Mario Galaxy's sense of universe isn't entirely diluted, since many of the galaxies do feel like places the various races, hey, that rhymed again, holy shit, you meet throughout the game actually live. All I'm really saying is that I prefer the world building from the previous mainline 3D game. The music is, as you can probably guess by now, very good. The Mario games, main series and spin-offs alike, almost always have incredible soundtracks. I'm pretty sure they're legally obligated to. Super Mario Galaxy is no exception to this rule, and features yet another all-star soundtrack to add to the list. Strictly in terms of fidelity, this game is the best in the series yet. All the games up to this point have used chiptunes or MIDI, and while those songs have been really catchy and memorable, Galaxy is an upgrade if we're talking about sound quality. Like I just said, it features live CD quality recordings of an orchestra and it sounds plainly awesome. Some songs are still MIDI, but they too seem to have higher fidelity instrumentation, or are at least on par with the MIDIs from Sunshine in that department. As for the compositions, they're also great, as per usual. I don't care for the Baron Burr boss theme because the melody is obnoxious. Pretty much everything else gets a gold star from me. From the Good Egg Galaxy to the credits, this game is chock full of hits, so why not kick back and once again have a listen to some of my favorite tracks. It's basically tradition in this review series by this point. So needless to say, this soundtrack is another legendary one to add to the list, and easily has some of the catchiest and most memorable songs in Mario history. I would still probably listen to the soundtracks of Mario 3, Land 2, and 64 over this, but this is some easy top 10 material for the whole series. And now I finally reached the actual meat and potatoes of the game. Super Mario Galaxy is the third 3D entry in the series, but it's a noticeable change from how Mario's previous 3D outings were structured. It doesn't change the formula entirely, but it plays more so like a hybrid between 2D and 3D Mario games up to this point. For starters, the main objective is pretty much the same as SM64 and Sunshine. You still have to collect power stars to progress, as most galaxies have a star requirement to unlock. The final level also requires 60 stars to access, exactly like how Bowser in the Sky requires 70. Additionally, most levels have more than one star in them, which functions exactly like the different episodes from the levels of Sunshine, down to how things about each stage change between the missions. Even the levels that have only one star on their mission select screen often have secret stars and comet challenges, which, more on those later. I'll have a piece to say on those sons of bitches way later in this review. All in all, it seems like a continuation of the previous game's formula, but the difference comes in how the stages themselves are structured. I'll go into much more detail when I talk about the level design in a bit, but all you need to know for now is that the levels are more linear like the 2D games, so that's why I said it plays like a hybrid. So that's the groundwork. How was the game itself? I'll be honest, I've bounced back and forth on it over the years somewhat, especially after revisiting it for the first time in years back in 2018. I've never disliked the game, but it used to be on the lower end of my personal tier list for the series, if you will. After revisiting it last year though, and especially after the playthrough I did for this review, I gained an even deeper appreciation for the game, how it plays, how it's designed, and all that. It's definitely up there as one of the most solid games in the series. I know, that's probably one of the coldest takes you'll ever hear from me regarding any game ever, but I don't care. This retrospective is all about why this series is my favorite one from gaming history, and Super Mario Galaxy is yet another great Mario game to add to the list. So let's get into the specifics, starting with the controls, handling, and general mechanics. Mario's handling in this game is more or less the same as before, but in my opinion, he's not quite as free-flowing as he was in the previous 3D titles. Not that he controls badly or anything like that, I just prefer how the last two games, especially Sunshine, controlled. Mario generally feels a lot slower than before, and his jumps are more floaty and feel a bit stiffer. This kind of control works well for the linear obstacle courses that make up the majority of this game's level design, but it does make traversing more open areas slower paced and a bit more tedious, though not unbearable. It's a serviceable control and physics system, even if it's not as all-around solid as 64, and especially Sunshine in this regard. As for the overall moveset, it's generally closer to SM64's in Galaxy. I say that because long jumps and backflips return from that game, two moves that were absent in Sunshine. The Flood Pack isn't in Galaxy, so it's a good thing that these moves are back to balance it out. The long jump is yet again a fun tool for shortcuts too, which is quite enjoyable to mess around with. The thing that sucks is that some of the best moves from the previous games are nowhere to be seen. The spin jump from Sunshine is gone, which is a bummer because that jump was so satisfying. Galaxy also doesn't have a dive move, something that's really bizarre considering how both of the previous 3D games had that. I also think the side flip is a lot more picky in its timing, which can get in the way but is nonetheless tolerable to an extent. However, the game makes up for that with the new spin move. I mentioned that Mario having Luma by his side gives him new powers earlier, and that comes in the form of this move. If you shake the Wiimote, then Mario will spin, which will both damage enemies and briefly stall you in midair. As an attack, it feels rather limited, but it's a great tool for platforming. It allows you to make slightly longer jumps, as well as save yourself from danger in many cases. Motion controls aren't my favorite thing in this world,
as you'll see later in this review.
But for the spin move, it's not intrusive and can even be satisfying to do in its own right. The sound design certainly helps with this. It's not as punchy as many other games I've played, but it gets the job done. The camera is even more limited than the controls when you compare it to the previous games. Whereas the movement control isn't downgraded that much, the camera is a lot more limited. Most of the angles are preset and you're not allowed to change them, and you're only occasionally allowed to manipulate the camera. Hell, you're not even allowed to enter the first person mode unless you're in designated areas. The preset angles work most of the time as the levels are designed around it, but there are a few moments where it can grate my cheese a little bit. It really only gets annoying in certain sections of stages that are more open actually. Usually it's fine, but in general it's a bit of a downgrade from the last two games overall. Yes, I did just say I think Super Mario 64 has a better camera system than Galaxy. Deal with it. So how is the level design as well as the game's defining gameplay element? I'll start with the former. For platformers especially, the quality of their levels is what ultimately makes or breaks them for me. A game can have great mechanics, but can still fail if there isn't any good level design to back that all up. Thankfully, this is not one of those cases, and Super Mario Galaxy's stages are well within the series' established quality standard. That being said, and I hinted at this before, they're structured rather differently from previous 3D Mario outings. The previous 3D Mario games primarily went for open-ended stages. They were focused on completing tasks and finding collectibles by exploring open areas rather than clearing linear obstacle courses like in the 2D games. Super Mario Galaxy, by contrast, shakes up the formula of the level design considerably for the 3D series. The stages are structured much more like the 2D games across the board, and a majority of the levels are linear obstacle courses. In a lot of cases, the stars act more as the flagpole rather than collectibles you find in the stage, even if the game's progression is still based on how many stars you have. Some stages are open-ended, and even the ones that aren't are more open than the 2D games despite their linearity, but a majority of them play closer to how the side-scrollers did. If I'm honest with myself, I prefer how the previous 3D games all did it. I think open-ended level design and full collectathon gameplay complements Mario's moveset in these games a lot more, and I generally find myself preferring more open stages in 3D games anyways. That's not to say I dislike Mario Galaxy's level design, far from it. It's just a personal preference thing, honestly. The stages of this game are overall good, even great in many cases. Platforming is solid and complements the controls, and is even fairly creative a lot of the time. Nothing from the main platforming stages feels cheap or poorly designed in the slightest, and the game is consistently fun throughout. It also gives you a taste of the action from 64 and Sunshine, as certain stages like Beach Bowl Galaxy are sandboxes like those games. Those are among my favorite levels in the game for obvious reasons, but I still get my kicks out of the more linear stuff that comprises the majority of the game. For a Mario game, that's the least I can ask for. I also enjoy the exciting set pieces the game has. It has these launch star segments, which serve the same purpose as the loops from the 3D Sonic games. Just a short automated breather segment that allows you to prepare for an upcoming platforming challenge, providing some spectacle in the meantime. The level set pieces themselves are rather exciting on their own too. From the platforms that form around you as you walk in Space Junk Galaxy, to the disappearing floors and walls of the Matter Splatter Galaxy and everything in between, Super Mario Galaxy has a consistent collection of engaging gameplay set pieces. I also quite like these pull star segments, which make for pretty good challenges that test your sense of timing. My three favorite levels are probably Buoy Base Galaxy, Toy Time Galaxy, and the Freeze Flame Galaxy. Toy Time has awesome moments like the robot Bowser fight and the silver stars in the 8-bit Mario sprite.
Hey, is that another rhyme?
And Bowie Base's aesthetic and music are simply incredible. I mean, you're playing what's essentially a flooded version of Whomp's Fortress with a gigantic Pokeball above it, all the while really epic music plays. What's not to love about that? Freeze Flame may just be my favorite level in the game though. Not only is it one of the coolest looking examples of a literal Hellfire Peaks, but it's also filled to the brim with creative puzzles and platforming sections based around the combination of fire and ice. None of these stages are quite as packed with constant high-octane action like some other games I've played, but they provide fun and interesting gameplay variety in their own right. Not everything in existence has to be this over-the-top, nuts-to-butts action set piece to be good, Charlie.
Nah, I'm just joking, man. I love it.
Mario Galaxy is yet another prime candidate that demonstrates this for me. The thing that really makes them an extra exciting visual and gameplay spectacle though, is the game's flagship mechanic. As its title implies, and like I've said in this review already, Super Mario Galaxy is a game that has an outer space theme, and it's entirely focused on exploring the cosmos. Since this is the case, it has a central mechanic, or gimmick if you will, that allows it to be its own spin on the 3D Mario gameplay. Super Mario Sunshine similarly did this sort of thing with the Flood Pack, and if you remember back to that review, I said Flood was my favorite central mechanic from a Mario game. Galaxy goes all in with its space theme and features gravity mechanics. Most objects have their own gravitational field, allowing you to jump onto a wall and stick to it, or run all around small planets without falling off. Now, contrary to what some people may believe, this was not the first platformer to feature mechanics like this. The Ratchet & Clank games, which also focus on exploring space, have mechanics like these on some of the smaller planets, and both Sonic Adventure games had moments like this as well. Even some older 2D titles had something similar. This doesn't say anything about Mario Galaxy's quality, I'm just trying to demonstrate that the idea of gravity mechanics in games wasn't anything new, even in 2007 when this game came out. That said, the way Galaxy implements the mechanics is more in depth than the examples I listed. The thing that makes it work so great is how well programmed the mechanic itself is, and how it's used to add an extra dimension to the level design. Whenever you jump into a gravity field, it's very responsive, and you'll never fail to attach to the object and suddenly fall to your death. Some required movements may seem awkward if you're used to the previous 3D games like me, where making such maneuvers would be very risky, but you'll always safely land on a planet or object regardless of that. These solid mechanics are put to great use throughout the game and enhance the already great level design. I especially love the segments where you're walking on smaller planets or platforms, since their smaller scale emphasizes the changes in perspective. However, the mechanic is not perfect, also contrary to what some people may believe. Even though I think Super Mario Galaxy is fun to play on the whole, it does have some issues and things that I think could have been improved. Trust me, I have some choice words in certain things, but I'll take it one step at a time here. As I just said, I enjoy the gravity mechanics in this game, but they aren't always flawless. I mentioned that the camera control has its issues, and occasionally the angles can somewhat screw with the gravity. It's not a constant issue, but I still counted several occasions where the camera's position made movement on small spherical or cylindrical objects somewhat awkward. Additionally, movement on the bottom of an object while the camera shows the top, as well as having to walk onto another side of an object, can be finicky. It feels like you're supposed to do a 180 on the control stick, but doing that makes Mario turn around and almost feels like he's walking backwards. You have to actually keep holding forward instead, which allows you to continue forward. Basically, whether or not you're upside down doesn't change the direction of your controls in these instances, which can be strange when in some other instances it does. This doesn't happen extremely often, it's just a mild pace breaker when it does. Surprisingly, even though Super Mario Galaxy is essentially the first Mario game to nudge in the direction of being a recreation of how the 2D games played in 3D, more than half of its power-ups act like they did in NES 64. Ever since Mario jumped to 3D in 1996, there have been two distinct ways power-ups have functioned in these games. Originally, once you collected one, you had it indefinitely as long as you didn't get hit or die. The Starman was the exception, as it gave you invincibility for a brief period rather than extending your moveset. However, come Super Mario 64, all the main power-ups acted closer to the Starman, and were temporary additions to your moveset rather than semi-permanent, except for the on-land green shell. It could be argued that Sunshine's flood nozzles fall into the 2D category of power-ups, but I'd say they're more so in a gray area because taking damage doesn't affect you which one you have. Not to say some of Galaxy's power-ups aren't like the 2D games, because some are, it's just that most are closer to Super Mario 64, namely the classic Starman, the Fire Flower, and the new Ice Flower and Red Star. The Starman works exactly as it always has, whereas the Fire Flower now has a time limit and is used for puzzle solving. Personally, I can see the argument for how the Fire Flower of the older games was overpowered, so this edition balances it somewhat and makes for some pretty fun time challenges. The Ice Flower is similarly a tool for timed puzzles, and I think it's, excuse the awful pun, even cooler than the Fire Flower. Mario physically becomes ice for a brief moment, and the game acts like he has frostwalker boots on. Ice platforms now generate under you when you walk on water or even lava. Fountains of water also become ice platforms when you jump on them, and you can even wall jump off waterfalls. How cool
Oh, there's a shitty pun again. Fuck!
is that? As for the red star, it's basically the same as the wing cap, except controversially, I don't enjoy it as much. Yeah, it may control slightly better, if you're that kind of person, but it's only used in one level, and it's an annoying one because the camera angles work like shite with the power up. But hey, at least you can fly around the observatory with it. That's cool, right? Oh, and the wing cap had a much better theme, to be honest. Yeah, the Red Star song is good, but no amount of angry comments will convince me otherwise. Like I said, the game also has power-ups that act like the older games as well. My favorite one of these is easily the bee mushroom. You're transformed into a bee and are given all the abilities that come with that. Flying for a short time, sticking to certain walls, it's really fun stuff. You also lose the power-up if you touch water, which adds an extra bit of challenge to using it, as you almost always get it in stages where there's water. Whenever I think of this game, this is one of the power-ups that comes to mind first. The boo and spring mushrooms though, I don't really like them. The boo shroom is at least tolerable most of the time, and is a funny decade-long foreshadow to Super Mario Odyssey. However, if you bump into a wall, you essentially get stopped in your tracks, which makes certain missions very frustrating when combined with stiff control. That stupid race in Boo's Boneyard Galaxy comes to mind, as you can lose the race just because the stiff control under the mushroom caused you to bump into a wall, which is a pain in the ass to say the least. The spring mushroom though, it's a contender for the worst Mario power-up ever. I've seen some people try to defend it, but I just don't understand that at all, personally. It controls like shit, and that's all I really need to say. It sucks. Mario's movement is very imprecise, the jumps take way too long to charge up and execute, you bounce off walls with the slightest touch which you can send you into a pit. This power-up is pure despair and is easily the worst one in the game. Finally, we have the assorted stuff, which really don't have categories. The underwater Koopa shells from SM64 are back, except they're not worthless because they last longer than 5 seconds. Here they're multiple colors. The green shells are the standard speed, the red ones make you go faster, and the gold ones are golden. These are fun and are used well in certain missions, yada yada, you get the picture. Last but certainly not least is the health shroom. Like the previous 3D Mario games, Galaxy makes use of a health bar, except you only have 3 health instead of 8. This sounds like a cheap way of increasing the difficulty on the surface, and maybe it is, but I don't think it's that bad personally. Still, if you explore the levels well enough or have enough star bits to feed a hungry Luma, trust me, more on those jackwagons later, you can get a mushroom that doubles your health. Yeah, it really is that simple. It's really satisfying when you do get one, and I always recommend you do whenever possible, especially if you're somehow a newcomer to this game. Super Mario Galaxy also has its fair share of boss fights, and I'd argue they're some of the stronger fights in the series. Up to this point, most of the bosses in Mario games have been, I'm just going to be blunt here, complete crap. This isn't exclusive to Mario games, and I'd actually say boss fights are consistently one of the worst parts of any platformer for me, with some rare exceptions. Ever since Mario 1, the bosses have mostly been so easy that they pretty much beat themselves. Bowser was a complete anti-boss in that game, and since then, the fights haven't improved very much. They do take more hits and have actual patterns, but these patterns were either easily broken or not challenging at all. In Mario 64, the bosses were similarly one note, and the ones in Sunshine had glimpses of brilliance, but most were similarly easy to defeat. Whenever a boss wasn't an easy pushover in one of these games, it was a frustrating test of patience, like pretty much all the world bosses from Mario Bros. 2 when its re-releases. As I said, Super Mario Galaxy has the best bosses in the series up to this point. Even though most aren't very hard, they at least have fun strategies to defeat, or are full of spectacle. For example, Bouldergeist has decently challenging attack patterns that are fun to dodge, and Mega Leg is impressive from the pure scale alone. Some fights are similarly piss easy like the past games, but on average they're much improved. That's a good thing, because this game has by far the most boss encounters in the series so far. Of course, a discussion of bosses in Mario games always entails a Bowser fight. Instead of how Sunshine did it, where there's only one Bowser fight at the end, Super Mario Galaxy has 3 throughout the game, which would basically be a standard from this point forward. Alongside that, Bowser Jr. has 3 boss stages. In the first 2, you fight one of Jr.'s lackeys, and in the third, you face off against the little shit himself. Like I said, Mega Leg is visually engaging, and the last 2 make really good use of the spin and shell mechanics. The Bowser fight this time around is honestly not that great. In all 3 encounters, you have to avoid the Koopa's King's attacks, lead him into a window with lava underneath, and then spin attack him until his next attack cycle begins. I like the attacks and how you have to fake him out under the glass, but hitting him with the spin is irritating. I mentioned that the range of the attack could leave something to be desired, and this is where that problem is at its worst. Additionally, when Bowser is running with his tail on fire or rolling around at the speed of on his back, the angle he moves at can feel random, which can be frustrating if things don't line up well. I'll take this over the Bowser throws from SM64, but I still don't particularly care for it. However, none of the flaws I've mentioned throughout this video so far are quite as severe as my biggest problem with the game. Super Mario Galaxy is a quite good, though imperfect game, and as long as you play the game casually, it's a lot of fun. That being said, the whole thing starts to fall apart the moment you attempt to go for 100% completion. I've been anticipating the moment I reach this point in the retrospective and talk about this ever since the production of these videos began late last spring, and now we're here. While most of the issues I had with this game back in 2018 are things that don't really affect my experience very much these days, the 100% completion experience in Mario Galaxy is something that I feel the same about as I did back then. Long story short, I don't think it's a very fun game to fully complete, which is a damn shame when you consider how much fun 100% was in 64 and Sunshine. For this playthrough, I tried. I really did. I went for as many stars as possible, but I honestly couldn't do it once again. To be fair, a majority of them are fun to play, and many of the frustrating missions that I haven't even attempted since 2018 are far better, or at least far less egregious than I remember. That said, getting 100% in this game requires periodically putting up with some of the worst pockets of gameplay in the 3D Mario series yet, and tolerating a few baffling design decisions, both of which are enough to dissuade me from 100%ing this game altogether. Before discussing the meat and potatoes of why I don't like 100% completion in this game, I think it would be best to mention its positives, because I do have some to speak of. I think a grand majority of this main stars in each stage are quite fun to play, as well as most of their secret stars. This is where I think the full completion aspect of Galaxy is at its best, because a lot of them focus on making the most of Mario's moveset. Sheesh, say that fast 100 times. Fuck. Which entails creating engaging platforming segments built around the moveset. The secret stars also provide some exploration value even in the more linear levels, much like the exits in Super Mario World or even hidden item boxes in the Sonic games. A lot of them are just locked behind a paywall of star bits, but even the ones that are often fun bursts of gameplay. Because of this, I was much more willing to go after these stars. But that's where the positives end and the problems begin. I don't usually remember this game's full completion experience for all these aforementioned good moments. I remember all the dumb optional shit, those things that serve as nothing more than huge pace breakers. I'll start with the less egregious stuff and slowly make my way up to my bigger complaints. First off, the secret galaxies, accessed by feeding hungry loomers on the observatory, and the bad secret stars, because yes, there are a few of those. The problem with the Luma galaxies is their absurd prices. At first, it's something reasonable, as in a few hundred star bits. By the end though, you're asked to pay as much as 1600 star bits. This wouldn't be a problem if their galaxies were actually worth playing, but several of them are either boring or frustrating as hell. For example, the Big Mouth galaxy requires getting a golden shell to open a chest, which is easier than pissing in the shower. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the Sling Pod galaxy, which is a grueling gauntlet that forces you to make these precise web-slinging shots, something that's nearly impossible with the lack of a reticle and jittery pointer controls. There's also only one checkpoint that's placed very disproportionately close to the end, so if you miss a shot, something that's guaranteed to happen at least a few times because of the control problems with this mechanic, you're almost certainly going to be sent back to the very start of this mission, which can be pretty annoying. I praised the secret stars earlier, but even those aren't completely free from occasionally dropping the ball. It's mostly these two trash destruction minigames encountered in the Battle Rock and Dreadnought galaxies. Both of these are infuriating for newcomers because of their absurdly strict time limits. Since the bombs have countdown timers that last an eternity before they explode, you can't make a single mistake, which is really hard not to do when the minigame requires you to throw them with perfect precision, and the throwing mechanic doesn't even have so much as a reticle telling you where they'll land. Thankfully, the developers were nice enough to place coin bulges that indicate where you should throw them, but that doesn't fix the minigame's inherent incompatibility with the given mechanics. The one in Battle Rock isn't the worst, but Dreadnought's incarnation is one of the worst parts of the game. If you don't play perfectly, you won't be able to complete the mission in time. It's just not that fun. Even worse than these things is the Prankster Comet system. If I had to compare these to anything, I'd say they're similar to the Dread challenges from Ratchet Deadlocked, but even then, that's a loose comparison. If a comet orbits a galaxy, it opens up a challenge star you can do there. What the challenge is can vary, which depends on the comet's color. Red comets require you to clear one of the level's missions and time limit. White ones make you fight a boss with only one health. Blue ones require you to raise Shadow Mario, or my bad, Cosmic Mario to a star. Yellow ones speed up enemies and hazards, and purple ones make you collect a bunch of purple coins. Purple comets require you to play past the credits to encounter, and honestly, I have better things to do than attempt to make those appear. Yeah, by saying that, I kinda let the cat out of the bag on why I don't like the Prankster Comets. The main problem is that they seem to show up and disappear at complete random. One minute you'll be playing a stage, and as soon as you leave it, a comet appears in orbit. This wouldn't be so bad, but once it's in orbit, the damn thing won't leave unless you finish its challenge. If you want to move it, you have to pay this purple Luma some of your hard-earned star bits, or it will just disappear randomly for no discernible reason every now and then. Apparently, getting certain stars makes the comets appear, but the game doesn't make it clear which ones do this. It feels almost like the Mega Man X6 Nightmare system, where playing some stages causes effects in others, and it feels totally random unless you look it up. Yes, I did just compare Prankster Comets to the Nightmare system. Sue me. I know what you're thinking. These things are just mild annoyances, because surely the comet challenges themselves are fun, right? Well, Not really, at least if you ask me. Now, that's not to say all of them suck. I do rather enjoy the Cosmic Mario races, and the Daredevil Comet for Bouldergeist is fun because that boss is at the perfect balance between easy and hard. The rest of them, however, range from far too easy to far too frustrating. On the easy end of the spectrum, you have the Fast Foe Comets and many of the speedrun challenges. The speedrun challenges have the potential to be really annoying, but the time you're given is so generous that you'll more often lose by dying to enemies than running out the clock. Fast Foe challenges are slightly harder than the normal versions of the missions, but if you have even the most basic form of reaction time, i.e. you're not a game journalist, then you'll be able to clear these no problem. Many of the Daredevil challenges are also far easier than they seem on the surface, because the boss's patterns are so simple to dodge without taking any damage anyway. In complete contrast, you then have the frustrating ones. I'll just look at the two worst examples. The Speedy Comet in the Dreadnought Galaxy is peak frustration. The mission you have to do suffers from some of the clunkiest camera angles in the game, and worst of all is this damn cannonball section where you can essentially get stun locked if you make even one mistake. The only way to get out of the damage loop is by falling back down to the start of the section before the pole stars, but since you're on a timer, this is a terrible idea. By the way, did I mention that you get sent all the way back to the start of the speedrun challenge if you die? Thanks, game. That's another 3 to 4 minutes I have to waste playing shit I've already played. Even worse than this mission is the Daredevil Comet in Deep Dark Galaxy. The problem with this is how fucking long the fight can take, which can be annoying for the normal run of the boss, but is absolutely painful here. Honestly, this mission just exposes how much the boss actually sucks. The boss, a giant Magic Koopa, spawns shells in that you have to throw at her to damage her. Thing is, these shells can't be picked up until they stop moving, and if they fall out of bounds, you can't attack and have to wait through another cycle. Whether or not the shell lands in bounds is essentially random, so whether you beat this boss can boil down to luck. That is not a good boss design if you ask me. This only gets worse once you reach the crow's nest of the ship where the fight takes place on, because there you're stuck on a small platform where the shell constantly falls out, and there's even normal sized Magic Koopas there to get in the way. Again, if you get hit even once, back to the start of the long fight you go, and you'll have to wait through even more cycles where the shell could possibly fall off the stage beyond your control. I'm still surprised I managed to beat this mission, to be honest. However, with all of that said, none of these things compare to my single biggest complaint about Super Mario Galaxy's 100% experience: the minigames. The other aspects of 100% in this game at least had some good points, but these minigames are pure refuse. Because this is an early Wii game, it shoves in half-baked, arbitrary motion control minigames that lack any sort of fine-tuning. I already mentioned those slinging webs, but the worst of the bunch are the manta ray and rolling ball. These types of mechanics aren't doomed to fail from concept alone. I mean, look at Super Monkey Ball, look at the blooper surfing from Super Mario Sunshine. It's just that the execution of these concepts in Galaxy is, like I said, not very good. Both the surfing and ball rolling suffer from the same fundamental issue: the control by moving the Wiimote, something that's incredibly stiff and awkward. It's so hard not to fall off the stage over and over again because of this, which makes these sections nothing more than a test of patience. Maybe it would be better if the Wii had a more accurate motion sensor when this game came out, but no dice. The most frustrating thing is if they'd just stuck to normal stick and button controls, these would have been decent sections that I could have enjoyed. As is, there are annoying segments that I hate playing, and are yet another reason why 100% completion in this game is something I refuse to do. I would actually prefer to play the Pachinko machine stage from Sunshine 20 times over this stuff, and I mean that with all sincerity. Even worse is when you get all the green stars, unlock the trial galaxies, and then find out they're just harder versions of the stupid motion controlled minigames. Yeah, fuck that shit. It's almost like Nintendo knew they sucked. The final slap in the face then comes in what your reward is for getting all 120 main stars. You get to do it all again, as Luigi. Yes, this is the first 3D Mario game to feature him. You first see him in the Blue Moon Galaxy, in a totally not reference to a certain GameCube game featuring him.
Help me!
You can then get a few power stars from him throughout the game, which is kind of funny, I'll admit. What isn't funny is when, as I mentioned, the game suddenly forces you to play as him and do everything all over again. Yes, that includes the comet stars, those annoying secret stars, the motion controlled minigames, everything. And what do you get for doing that? A lame purple coin star in the Mushroom Kingdom. Screw this, man. I'm just gonna stick to the standard any percent playthrough. Bottom line is, 100% completion in this game just isn't challenging in a rewarding way. That honestly really sucks for me, because if you remember, I loved 100% completion in both Super Mario 64 and Sunshine, the latter especially. Hell, it was even a lot of fun in Super Mario World. Thing is, those games have much more consistently good side quests, aren't bogged down by annoying minigames, and are consistently challenging in a fun way, even if I don't find either game particularly difficult. I don't want to make it seem like my extended bitching about this aspect of the game means I hate Mario Galaxy or whatever. No, I think it's a really fun platformer that generally accomplishes what it wanted to, and it's a fantastic addition to the already incredible catalog of Mario games. I just don't care for 100% completion, which is really disappointing for me when the past two 3D Mario games, and even the previous 2D console Mario game, had such fun full completion experiences. So with everything discussed, I'll do what I usually do and talk about the ending of the game, which is probably one of the most exciting finales in the series' history. It all starts when Mario gets all the Grand Stars and enough Power Stars, which gives the Comet Observatory ample power to fly to the center of the universe, where Bowser is keeping Peach. Rosalina flies Mario there, and he charges towards Peach's castle on a bridge of those platforms that appear in front of him. As usual, this game has a big final stage to cap off the level design. This is easily the most epic final stage in the series so far. I mean, you're storming a basement to generate a whole new galaxy, those things that are so big it literally takes light anywhere from 3,000 to 300,000 years to travel from one end to the other at the literal center of the universe. This is further supported by the music, which is unique from the two other Bowser stages. I don't know why Mario games don't try to stand out like this anymore, because it's excellent stuff and sorry. I jumped the gun a bit there. The final stage itself is designed quite well and properly puts all your learned skills to one last test. It also features numerous standout set pieces like gravitized spotlights, moving platforms suspended over lava, and those platforms that appear in front of you when you enter their range. Design-wise, this is definitely a step up from Corona Mountain and is about on par with Bowser in the Sky as far as final stages in 3D Mario are concerned. Once you reach the deepest parts of Bowser's Galaxy Reactor, you see him, Bowser Jr., and the princess at the end of a long, unstable walkway. After avoiding fireballs and collapsing platforms, you finally come face to face with Bowser himself. In the background is the core of the galaxy generator itself, a gargantuan hollow star with numerous massive holes in its surface. Bowser says that Mario arrived perfectly on time to see the creation of his new galaxy, and says he's prepared to conquer the universe and create an empire that will last forever. Mario doesn't back down, and the two immediately engage in a fight which will determine the fate of the universe, beginning the final boss. This fight makes use of the same mechanics as the last two Bowser encounters, which unfortunately doesn't mean I enjoy it much mechanically. I already went over why earlier. Trying to hit Bowser was just kind of annoying because of the spin attack's limited range. However, saying that alone would ignore just how incredible the aesthetics of this fight are. You're fighting Bowser in the middle of the damn universe, and you slowly get closer to that giant star in the background. The last phase even takes place in its core, with a full orchestral symphony piece that really sells the high stakes of the moment. It's a shame that the gameplay doesn't quite live up to everything else that surrounds the fight, because those things are really that well done. Eventually, Mario defeats Bowser, and he falls into the fiery inner surface of the star. The final Grand Star is then freed from the machine in the center, and once Mario grabs it, he and Peach are taken to safe ground. However, this safety is short-lived, as the loss of the Grand Star's power causes the incomplete galaxy to start crumbling. Bowser, who survived being burned alive, is seen lamenting over what's happening, and then the star he landed on undergoes a rapid supernova that causes a huge black hole. Everything around the area, including Peach's castle, Bowser's airships, the Comet Observatory, and more are all sucked in, and all hope seems lost. At the last second though, the Lumen that had been with Mario throughout this whole journey pops out of his hat and follows what is easily one of the saddest scenes in the entire series. Jesus, man. The Lumas all sacrifice themselves for the good of the universe, which causes the black hole and everything else in the whole universe to compress into a single point. The amalgamation twists into double tornado form, which then shrinks and causes a massive explosion that essentially serves as a reset button for the timeline. Mario wakes up and sees Rosalina, and around them is the sounds of crying. Those are the sounds of new Lumas, stars, and galaxies, which had been reduced to stardust and are now ready to reform. Rosalina says that the cycle is repeating itself, something that never quite happens in the same way each time. I'll be entirely honest, while this entire ending is overall pretty solid, I'm not a huge fan of how Rosalina talks here. I don't know, I guess it just sounds a bit too much on the pretentious side of things. It's not really a word that describes it particularly well, but it's the best one I can think of. Regardless, Mario once again wakes up, and this time everything has returned to normal. It's a nice sunny day in the Mushroom Kingdom, and the Star Festival is ready to commence again. Peach is with him, and so is Bowser, but for now they're all stand together in peace. Or at least, they don't fight. Rosalina is then heard again, saying everyone, even Mario, carries the essence of the stars. Mario then realizes what this implies, and welcomes the creation of all new planets and galaxies in this cycle of the universe. Overall, a nice note to end this long journey on. In general, this ending is quite well done. Not perfect, but pretty good, and I'll be honest when I say that the Loomis sacrifice scene makes me choke up every time I see it. The story in this game is already one of the better ones in the series, and this whole finale only solidifies that for me. I only wish the gameplay of the final boss was a little better, and that Rosalina's speech was toned down a little bit, but other than that, it's a near perfect finale for a Mario game, and quite possibly the best one thus far. And really, that's all I have to say about this game. Let's wind down and wrap things up. In general, I think Super Mario Galaxy is a great addition to the series, and I even think its highs are some of the highest in the series yet. As the title implies though, I unfortunately think it suffers from some of its lowest lows yet as well. In many respects, it's the best in the series so far. The graphics are beautiful and impressive for an early Wii game, the game has tons of spectacle and creative environments, the music is amazing and has the highest quality instrumentation so far, and the mere idea of doing platforming challenges across planets through space is great on its own. The gameplay lives up to the potential it had and then some, with spin move that's really fun to use, great level design across the board, well done gravity mechanics and more, and the plot is one of the best in the series with an incredible finale. However, these things are also matched by several flaws. Gravity mechanics, while great, can be clunky sometimes, and the camera doesn't always work as well as it could have. While most of the power-ups are fun, you still have the Boosh Room and the Spring Mushroom, which are just bad, and the Red Star, which has tons of wasted potential due to it only being used once in an annoying mission. While the level design taking a more linear direction than the last two 3D games isn't an inherently bad thing, I nonetheless prefer the mostly open-ended stages from those two titles. My biggest problem with Mario Galaxy though is the 100% completion experience. As opposed to 64 in Sunshine, which had amazing full completion experiences, the one in Galaxy is bogged down by numerous frustrating stars, the annoying comet mechanic, and half-baked motion control minigames that are a pain in the ass to control and play. Worst of all though is that you have to do it all again as Luigi. All you get for doing that is a lame, easy purple coin star. You may say that the 100% rewards in the past games were underwhelming, but I didn't mind that because those games were fun to play to full completion in the first place. Galaxy just has too many low points for me to want to see 100% through to the end, and so I'd much rather stick to doing the basic any percent playthrough. That's a shame because the stars and levels that are good are really good, which makes those momentary lapses even more tragic. This game could have been my favorite entry in the series up to this point, but I still overall prefer 64 and Sunshine and find myself revisiting them far more often. But honestly, that's okay. Not every game has to be the best of all time, and Mario Galaxy is a lot of fun if you just sit back, enjoy yourself, and avoid all the bad parts, because the good parts are easily some of the best in the series, and I think that's worth remembering. And that does it for my review of Super Mario Galaxy. That was a beefer to say the least, and I had no idea that this would end up being the longest one in the marathon so far. I'll try to make the upcoming episodes a lot shorter, but there's no promises because I often get carried away with this stuff. By the time this review is up on YouTube, it's probably getting closer to my finals this semester, so I won't have as much time to work on videos. It feels like I say that in all of these, but college can be unpredictable sometimes, you know? You never know if you'll suddenly get swamped with a bunch of work during any given week. In any event, the next review will obviously be on the direct sequel to this game, Super Mario Galaxy 2, also for the Nintendo Wii. This is another game I've been looking forward to playing and reviewing since early on in the marathon, and like this game, I think it will make for an interesting video. Super Mario Galaxy is, like some of the other games I've reviewed, founded on many great ideas. It's just a bit rough around the edges and is ripe to be cleaned up, streamlined, and expanded upon in a sequel. Join me in my next review, where I'll discuss how well I believe Super Mario Galaxy 2 follows up on that potential. It may take a while to get to that video, and once it does happen, I hope it will have been worth the wait. That's all I have to say. I'm Diamond Miner Studios, and I hope you have a fantastic day. See you all in the next review.